Hi, this is Emily Midgett with Sixth Street Sundries, here today to help celebrate this month's United We Flourish collaboration with Ellen Hutson. This month's collaboration comes from Altenew and is an absolutely stunning poppy set, complete with both outline images as well as the layered stamping that Altenew is known for. Let's get started. For this card, I used the United We Flourish Poppy Fields stamp and dies, the individual leaf die from the Ellen Hutson Poinsettia and Pine die set, Distress Oxide inks in Peacock Feathers and Wilted Violet, as well as my Daniel Smith watercolor palette. I purchased the palette itself from Amazon, but I purchased all of the individual colors from Ellen Hutson's Daniel Smith collection because they're an absolutely fantastic price, especially if you have a coupon. I will link to the paint palette in the description as well as the Daniel Smith page at Ellen Hutson. I built up my collection gradually as I had the funds to do so don't panic when you see the prices of the individual tubes. I've had these watercolors for almost 4 months and still have not even made a dent in all of the tubes. For this project, I die cut and heat embossed several poppies onto some Arches cold press watercolor paper. I personally prefer Arches to use with the Daniel Smith paints, but that is most definitely my own personal preference. The color moves beautifully and it doesn't seem to soak into the paper so quickly as it does with some other brands. I have also been using the silver white synthetic paintbrushes for my painting for a while now, and I love them. I'll link them in the description below. When using my pan paints, as with all of my watercoloring, my philosophy is to use lots of layers. I start with a fairly diluted layer of color, laying the color down in the areas which I feel would have the deepest concentration of color, usually towards the center of the flower where the individual petals will connect to the base of the flower. For this particular bloom, I first lay down a layer of diluted carbazole violet towards the center of the flower, then pull the color out with just the tip of my clean, damp paintbrush. After laying down the first layer of fairly light color, I mixed together some carbazole violet with neutral tint in a more concentrated mixture and began to add some shadows in essentially the same locations that I placed the first layer of color. I lay down the color in a much smaller amount because it is more concentrated and because I don't need to cover the entirety of the petal, just the area in which I want shadows. I again use the tip of my clean damp paintbrush to pull the color out and blend into a nice fade. I'm sure to concentrate the shadows towards the center of the flower, as well as being conscious of petals that appear to be behind another petal, giving them more shadows and depth than those petals in the front. You will notice that I'm frequently turning the cutting board to which I have my die cuts mounted with washi tape. I do this so that gravity can aid me in blending the color down into an organic fade. You can add as many layers of color as you think necessary, but for the timing purposes of this video, I'm only adding 2 layers of color to achieve depth and dimension. Your own unique artistic vision of the flower is what makes each watercolored flower special. For the lighter colored poppies, I wanted to do a lavender bloom that was almost white, so I chose to work with Daniel Smith's Moon Glow. It's a lovely purple, good for creating shadows and adding depth. The key with light colored flowers is to use a light hand with the amount of pigment you lay down. It's easy to add color, but far more difficult to take it away. I used the same technique as before, adding multiple layers of color towards the center of the flower, then pulling the color out with a damp paintbrush. But when creating a white flower, you want to leave some white on the paper on the petals. I only add color where I want there to be shadows, and I use plenty of clean, clear water to blend the colors out. For the leaves interspersed in the bouquet, I simply die-cut the leaf sprigs from Ellen Hutson's Poinsettia and Pine standalone die set twice from regular white cardstock. I then covered the leaves in Versamark and silver embossing powder, melted it, and repeated the process a total of 3 times to create an almost molten silver die cut. For the background panel, I wanted to showcase how beautifully the Distress Oxide inks blend on colored cardstock. Because they're opaque, they almost pop off of the light gray background. I started by creating a frame on my light gray A2 panel using Post-it tape. Then, using my blending tools, I blended the Wilted Violet and Peacock Feathers inks together. There's just enough blue in both of these secondary colors to create a lovely shade of medium blue when blended together. After blending, I wanted to bring out the oxide quality of these unique inks, so I removed the tape and spritzed them with a little Sukaneko shimmer spray. The water in this shimmer spray brings out the oxidation qualities of this ink. For the greeting, I used my Misty to stamp a greeting from the United We Flourish stamp set on my blended panel using VersaFine ink, which I then heat embossed with clear embossing powder to make it pop from the background. It's amazing what a huge difference adding that clear embossing powder makes in bringing a sentiment to life. After I had finished my background panel, it was time to arrange my flowers and silver leaves. When I had arranged them in a cluster to my satisfaction, I used press and seal to pick them up so that I could add my dimensional foam adhesive to the back while still attached to the press and seal. Using the press and seal ensures that the floral bouquet stays in the same position that I've arranged it while I add the adhesive. It's a very useful little tip, and press and seal is definitely a staple in my craft room. After I had adhered everything to the blended panel, I added a few sequins and gems to add even more sparkle. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about my techniques for my Daniel Smith watercolors, as well as seeing some distress blending in action. The beautiful poppy set from Ellen Hutson and Altenew is a limited edition, so hurry over to Ellen Hutson and grab your own copy of Poppy Fields today. If you'd like to see some other cards made using this set, or if you'd like to see more written details about how these cards were made, please feel free to click over to my blog, emilymidgett.com. Thanks so much for watching, and have a marvelous day.